Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host, Jivraj, and today I have with me an extremely special guest. Join me in welcoming Mr. Shashank Kumar, the co-founder of Razorpay. Thank you so much, Shashank, for joining me. Absolutely honored to be hosting you today.
Hey, Jivraj, thanks for the invitation, man. Really glad to be here. Yeah.
Glad to hear that. And I must say that the Razorpay product is one that all of us adore. But beyond that, the Razorpay stories is something that really fascinates me, especially as a 22-year-old aspiring entrepreneur. So I want to start, before we dive deeper into the Razorpay stories, I want to talk about something that is unique to you and start off on an abstract note, talking about unrealized potential and utilizing yourself. This is something you mentioned in the past and has been a part of the story of Razorpay, where while at Microsoft, you felt that you were not utilizing your potential to the fullest. And this has been a characteristic visible from your journey, right? So if you can talk to us about how and what that means, and how can you manifest that with actions? Because so many of us feel that, right? So many of us feel that we could be doing more, we could be really, really building stuff, and we want to. But not many of us can do what you have been able to do, especially with Razorpay and what the team has been able to achieve. So I think it'd be great if we start on that note.
So when I was in Microsoft, right, actually I had a very good job, and I was working on some technical problem statements and making progress on those in the part of the Windows team. See, a lot of times, right, most of us, uh, work on problem statements that are given by others to us, right? We work on things, with certain constraints, certain boundaries that are there, right? And that's kind of the story that happens from childhood, like, that, okay, like do well in school, do well in college, get a good job, and start getting promotions, right? So what will happen if you remove those boundaries, right? What will happen if you start choosing your own goals or your own destination, right? Like if nobody else is giving it to you, right? Uh, and that is what happens, right? Most of people, that kind of environment or that kind of situation actually is very it strikes a lot of fear, right? Like if you wake up one day, right, and you don't know what you are supposed to do,
Yeah.
right? Nobody's telling you what to do for next 1 month or 2 months or whatever, right? And then it becomes a very different kind of story, right?
Yeah.
But usually when you're working, you're working on certain things where others are giving those goals to you. What if you choose a 10 times more difficult goal, right, which you are passionate about?
Yeah.
What if you choose something that you where you are willing to work way harder than anyone else or any other time in your life, right? So those are things that many people, I don't think, are able to explore uh, and kind of become comfortable in their daily lives, right? I know a lot of my friends who are super intelligent and very high IQ, who have done very well in school, in college, right? uh, but now there is no well defined path for them, right? When you work in a large organization, right, you can only work in a very narrow scope, and that kind of limits the impact that you can create, right? So I always ask people that, always think about how you can uh, 10x your impact, right? How you can choose more ambitious goals and work towards that, right? Because even if you fail, if you're working on a 10 times harder problem, even if you fail, I think you'll still be able to do much better than what you would normally when you're working on a very narrow uh, thing, right? And you would never know unless you try that out,
Yeah.
right? So that is what I mean. That is what I felt, right? That I've got the best education in the country, which is heavily government subsidized, right? Uh, and uh, as part of Microsoft, obviously, like there's going to be a certain growth path, which is very linear in nature, right?
Mhm.
So how can I at least aim for having a much more impact, and control my destiny that is there, right? And that is what I encourage everyone to do. And that doesn't really mean that everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, right? That's not the intention. But at least you consciously think for yourself, right? Consciously set up goals for yourself, right? Consciously try and do things which makes you really uncomfortable, right? But you're still willing to take an attempt at it and see like where you'll land, right? And take that kind of risk. And then only you'll know how it pans out, what is your true potential that is there.
Absolutely. No, I think that's wonderful because as I was researching for the episode as well, what stood out for me was the fact that you've been accustomed to challenging yourself and accepting those challenges in a way that you thrive in them, and which is a result which is very evident to the entire world now with Razorpay, right? So I think that's marvelous to hear, and if we can all internalize that principle, I think the country is going to see even more innovation that it already is. So wonderful to hear that. Further, Shashank, before we dive into Razorpay stories, I want to understand the importance of market, right? And you mentioned that in the past, but as young entrepreneurs going into uncharted territory, can you talk to us about what the importance of market can be and why it is underappreciated, in my opinion, right? So if you can talk about those aspects, because as youngsters, it's very easy to just look at your problem set or to just look at the solutions, right? And build and ship and do the things that you're possibly great at. But to perceive and have that long-term thought that this is something that can have infinite possibilities, this is something that where you can have large impact, this is a bottom of the pyramid problem that you and Harshil both have repeatedly told us about as well. But how did you perceive it at the start and what the importance of market is in the general sense of an entrepreneur? I think that'd be wonderful to hear.
So for people who don't know about Razorpay, right? Razorpay itself provides payments and neo-banking products to businesses in India, right? So any business can integrate using Razorpay and start accepting payments very quickly, like within minutes, right? And just integrate one or two lines of code, or even don't integrate anything, like just use the no-code tools that we provide and start accepting payments within minutes. That is there, right? And that is the problem that we have solved over the last few years. That is there, right? Now, when we started in 2014-15, right, our own personal experience with payments was really bad. Most of the incumbents, were not focused on small businesses or startups, mostly focused on enterprises, right? Now, look at the timing, right? It is 2014-15. The startup fever at that time also was really high, right? It's pretty evident that there are going to be a lot of startups and businesses which will be coming online.
Yeah.
Then second, 2G and 3G were already widespread, and 4G was taking root slowly, right? It had already come up in the developed countries. I think even in developing countries like India, it was assumed that it will come up. So what that entails is that internet is going to explode in a big way, right? It will become cheaper for everyone to access a lot of data that is there. And third, the smartphone revolution itself, right? Even at that point of time, smartphone penetration was increasing year on year very significantly. And I think it is clear that sitting in 14-15, that in next 10 years, everyone will have a smartphone, right? You can debate which smartphone maker will be successful. You can debate which smartphone technology will be more popular. But at 10 years from 2015, what the ground truth that we assumed was that everyone will have a smartphone, right? So look at the combination of these three things, right? The fact that smartphone, everyone will have a smartphone. The fact that everyone will be using internet, right? The fact that there will be a lot more SMEs and startups coming up, right, which will want to leverage internet as a distribution channel, right? All these three things combined made it very clear that it's uh, whatever any problem that you can solve for digital businesses in the country will have a huge scope, right? And these are technology trends that we want to align ourselves to. And we saw that gap in the market in terms of payments, in terms of SMEs and businesses not having a smooth experience when it comes to online payments, mobile payments, payments over 2G or 3G networks, right? And we solved for all those problems when we started, and we got an extremely good mind share from day zero that is there, right? When you're building, when you're trying to gain traction, either you are already working in a big market or you're trying to create a new market, right? In both the scenarios, you have to think of what the underlying technology trends are, what the underlying shifts that are happening, right? And see like how you can take advantage of those over time, right? So it is not a perfect thing, even if you are able to align yourself. See, at the end of the day, execution matters a lot, way more than the idea or this environment that is there. Execution is really, really important, right? But you can think of a lot of examples historically. Like think of Uber. The fact that smartphone penetration was already at a significant point in US created a very good environment for Uber to take off from there, right? If iPhone and smartphone hadn't already created some mark, it would have been extremely difficult, right? Uh, think of similarly like WhatsApp that is there, right? The WhatsApp executed really well, but the aspect around how everyone has access to internet or and phone, and all of everyone wants to talk to everyone. I mean, these are fundamental truths uh, that are there, right? So you have to align yourself to those kind of shifts that are happening, and that kind of creates long-term success, right? So this is not difficult to identify. This is just a question of you people being aware of what kind of technology shifts that are happening. Even if you are in a very crowded market, you can always find niche, which is a big problem areas, or areas where you see a lot of friction, right? Or you see some sort of change happening longer term, and you can work off on top of that and try and take a bet there, right? And try and do something. It doesn't mean you'll always succeed. It's okay to fail a lot of times. It does increase your probability by a margin.
Absolutely. No, I love that because, asking yourself those fundamental truths and riding those headwinds just makes the journey easier than creating markets, I'm guessing. But then those fundamental truths do exist and you have to figure them out. So wonderful to hear that.
Yeah, but it's fantastic that a lot of people still don't. Whenever any kind of change happens, a lot of people still cling to the status quo that is there, right? So in 2005, when we had MySpace and Orkut and Facebook, all these things that are there, I think there was still a lot of questions on whether social media is going to be huge, right? While I think for a minority of the audience, I think it was obvious that social media is going to take over everyone's lives some point, right? It may take 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. It's a matter of time. I don't think like the kind of disruption it brought, it's going to expand worldwide, but still many people doubted that that kind of change would have come through at that point.
Absolutely. No, I mean, these fundamental truths can be hard to believe in the moment, but you have to trust some of those instincts, follow the numbers, know what's going to happen, and, understand where all of that connects, I guess. And that is Razorpay is a wonderful example of that, right? But, further, I want to take a step back and go into some of those early stories. And you mentioned those in the past of how, you and Harshil met at SDS Labs. There was this love for building, but early on working out of Jaipur, not getting too much success with the banks, right? Until that first story happened. There must have been a lot of uncertainty that you were dealing with, because after all, it was a group of college students trying to disrupt a traditionally not conventional market, right? So talk to us about how do you, in the face of adversity, still persevere, and how did Razorpay, how were those early days of just building out of that apartment? How did you, surpass those early days to figure out that, okay, this is something that clicks and we are going to do this for the most amount of time till we become market leaders that we are now seeing, right? So talk to us about those 2014 days and how everything panned out then.
Sure. See, I'll tell you one thing, right? When we started, I set a goal for myself that I'll give this at least 2 years, whether I fail or succeed, because trying out anything, giving it time, if I'm only giving it 2 or 3 months and expecting like a huge success, that is obviously not going to pan out, right? And success, like in, many things else, compounds as time goes on, right? So what is important, even in those days, and we were not as ambitious, we were not like, we have to win the whole of India and establish ourselves as a de facto payment choice. When we started, we just wanted to, establish a payments company, right, which is solving for SMEs and businesses, and then, go further from there, right? So the initial milestones themselves are like really important, and in the initial days when, we were not getting banking approvals, or we were not able to get compliance approvals, a lot of those times, I think ultimately what helped was that we thought like whatever may happen, like we'll give this much time and we'll try and make progress. And we don't want to come out empty handed, right? We want to have show some progress for our, if not for anyone else, but for ourselves, that we have given our best here, right? We have tried everything that we can before we say, "Ki, look, we are not able to make progress on this thing." I think those elements really helped. Even in scenarios where we had to run around banks, or we had to run around initial customers that was there. We were trying to build out the product. We were talking to schools and colleges at one point of time, right? I think all those experiences helped a lot in the later phases, because we learned how to take rejection as they come on our chin, again and again and again. And ultimately, in a lot of these things, right? I mean, you only need like one yes, you only need few yeses to get to the next stage, right? So there are always a lot of stories that you have talked to investors, and many investors don't get it, or they keep on saying no. That's okay, because you only need one yes, right? You only need one big yes from an investor, from a customer, and that is enough to propel you to the next stage. And then you can start thinking, okay, where do I go from here, right?
Yeah.
So I think me and my co-founder Harshil, we always used to have a lot of these conversations. Okay, what do we do next, right? What is our goal for next 2 months or 3 months? How do we achieve that? What are 10 different ways we can try and achieve that, right? Have we tried out everything? Have we exhausted every possibility that kind of exists, right? I think one major thing in all of this was that I think we had a very high conviction on ourselves and on what we are trying to do, right? That if there's even a small chance that if we are successful, I think we knew that it will change the trajectory of our life, right? Or it will change, the kind of impact that we can create, right? So I think from the very start, like we had very high conviction on ourselves and on the fact, on the idea that we are trying to pursue. And I think that also plays a very important role in the face of all these adversities, as to how far can you keep grinding and keep pushing through before you kind of see initial success that is there.
For sure. No, I think the conviction and the giving yourself time, the patience, right? I think that's so important. And I love the conviction fact, right? I mean, if everybody can just believe in themselves and believe in their actions and execute accordingly, I think that's going to snowball into so much of the success that we now see with Razorpay. Phenomenal to hear. I think these are all wonderful stories. But ramping it up and talking more about how you've built out Razorpay over the years, right? Because one thing that has been a constant, and again, a lot has been spoken about the product first culture, customer support being still done by high level execs at Razorpay, and the singular focus of not doing too much, saying no when required, but doing one thing really well, in this case payments, and only then expanding, right? So if you can perhaps talk to us about how that has built out, right? Organizational culture, hiring, and all of those aspects that make Razorpay what it is today. I think that'd be great cues for every young entrepreneur listening in.
Yeah, okay. You wrapped around quite a few things.
Yeah.
See, the from a cultural perspective, I think the founders and the initial hires play a significant role, right? So when building an organization, right, the founders and the first 6, 7, or 8 hires kind of make or break the culture for the organization for a very long time, right? So I think we were lucky in that sense that we got the initial hires really right. People who are who can work across disciplines, people who don't think of like working in one stream, right? You always think of, okay, I have to solve the end problem, whatever it takes. That is there. People who are very goal focused, who are ambitious, right? And that kind of define the culture of the organization. And there are other things too that happen. Right? All of us were young. We hadn't worked in a lot of corporate companies that are there. All of us came from the perspective that, okay, like we should do the right thing, right? We should build a place which respects people, which respects ideas, right? Which respects customers. Uh, we knew these folks when we started, and that's the kind of people that we wanted in the company, and that set the base for the company for a very long time, till we crossed 100 employees. People all automatically imbibe the same attributes by observing founders and the initial team members, and figuring out like this is how they should behave here, right? Once you start crossing 100, then you need to think of like various other mechanism to push culture in the organization, right? Or enable, people, how do they imbibe different cultural values. Same when you cross 500, when you cross 1,000 people, the mechanism for for promoting culture in the organization changes, but the focus still needs to be significantly there. And I think the whole thing around customer obsession or product culture or engineering culture, I think, came from that part, right? Like both me and Harshil are like core engineers and product people, right? Both we like talking to customers a lot, right? Our people that we had initially used to talk to a lot of customers and try and understand their problems and solve for that. I think it just kept building up from there, and we try to never lower that aspect for the organization, and that is what helped us, bake it in the initial years, that is there. And now we have to try a bunch of different mechanisms to ensure like we don't dilute those factors, and ensure like we still maintain the same cultural values and evolve it as time goes on.
Absolutely, no. But if I may ask you to double click on the hiring bit, right? I mean, to hire the right kind of folks which will gel well with the culture, which are high agency, high ownership, and are not afraid of dirtying their hands, right? No matter what, right? Solving that end problem. How do you identify those people? Because as you said, they can be make or break, and Razorpay was able to successfully crack that piece. So are there any actionable steps that you ensured, or what was the mechanism? Like, what were your discussions with Harshil, and what would you think of before hiring so and so, right? I think those cues would be wonderful if you can share some bits and pieces with us.
Sure, actually, uh, you can filter such folks, right? It's not an extremely difficult problem. I think the problem usually happens in finding such people, but I think filtering is not so difficult. You can always see whether the person is self-motivated or not, right? Whether the person is genuinely curious or not, right? Whether they like working in defined boundaries or they seek problems to solve by themselves, right? Whether they can combine knowledge from different disciplines and create something new, something unique, right? That normal people usually don't think of, right? Because most people have very high knowledge from one area which they are able to leverage, and they kind of specialize, and that's okay. That's very much needed too, right?
Yeah.
But in the early stage, you obviously want people who can work across various aspects, right? Various disciplines. They are very goal focused, very goal oriented, and know how to hack together things to achieve that goal, right? So I think and me and Harshil always talk like we want people who are either very good at engineering, right, but understand product equally well, and know how to talk to customers equally well, right? Or we want business folks who can talk to customers, or who can talk to bank people, who can go back and talk to engineers that are there, right? Who can even do marketing to an extent, who can be the face of the company if the need be. And we obviously, like the interview process that is there, or just our personal connect that is there, like we designed it like that so that we are able to filter such people. I think the more difficult thing that happens for entrepreneurs is how to find such people. For in our case, we were really, really lucky, to be honest, because we knew such people from our SDS labs days or our college days, and we were able to hire our friends, our juniors, people whom we have mentored personally, right, or people who have grown alongside us, and be part of our journey, and that was tremendously helpful. But finding such folks is really difficult, and that is where your own personal network comes into play, or your own connects, or your own the way the people whom you surround yourself with, right? Those are the factors that really come into play and say, okay, I mean, if do you have such people around you who can take an abstract problem statement and still be able to make significant progress on it with time.
Right. No, that's wonderful. Again, I mean, so finding the right people is more important than filtering them is my cue from that answer. But definitely, point well taken. And thus the importance of network, which was, again, sometimes it's luck, sometimes you have to be in the lookout, sometimes you just have to carve it out for yourself, but it all just connects in some shape or form. But great. I mean, that I think is a good segue to the second side of the conversation, where I want to talk about, the product building phase. And I briefly mentioned that again, there's been a strong focus area for Razorpay to solve payments for medium and small enterprises, right? And only then have you now started to, let's say, geographical expansion, talk about it, or different products from the same space, right? Entering different verticals. But for the longest time, you steered away from all the noise. It's not been a trend worthy product, and you've done what you do best and expanded in those categories, right? So talk to us about how is it that you resist that temptation of maybe doing so much, right? It would be easy for you to, let's say, do everything, right? Want to do everything, then follow those parts, but you did not. And there was this strong focus. So how did that product focus evolve, and how did you maintain that over the life cycle of the company? I think that'd be great to hear.
I think we have had this very simple philosophy since the start, right? Whatever customer segment that we are serving, we want to be really loved in that customer segment before we kind of expand the demography or the product suite that is there, right? So if we are serving businesses, startups, right, and we want to give them a really great experience with respect to payments to startups, right? Then I think we'll put all our bandwidth towards solving for that before we, even think of doing anything else, right? Because ultimately, if you do two things or three things in parallel, that splits your bandwidth. There's no doubt that splits your attention. And then you can't focus on building a very quality product that is there, right? And that is why, like in the initial few years, there was a lot of pressure or just the way the market is that, hey, you should go and build a consumer wallet, right? Because consumer wallet is the trend that is there. You should go and build a UPI app for consumers, right? Or you should, go and build for some other segment, like, you should burn more to get more customers, right? But I think we always, went with the approach that, how are we acquiring customers, right? And is that scalable, right? Can we keep acquiring customers that way? And second, do they love our product, right? Will they recommend it to others? Will they, talk positively about our product, right? The moment we saw fitment on these two things, then we would expand to a bigger demography, or expand our marketing or expand our product feature set to the next level, and then repeat that approach. And I think for a very long time we felt like that B2B payments is not solved, right? We haven't solved it for businesses at all, and we need to keep working on that aspect. And that is what has happened, and see, there will always be many opportunities that you can go after. And that's okay. You don't need to go after every opportunity. That will anyways not be a good approach. And it's even okay, like if there are others who come out for those opportunities, as long as you can ensure that in the area that you are working in and you're playing in, you are doing an excellently good job, amazing job, and nobody else is able to capture market share from you, right? I think for initial 3 years, we were just focused on building payment gateway for businesses and startups, and become the de facto choice for startups on payment gateway. And that is what happened. And then only we said, okay, now can we go to bigger startups which are Series C or Series D funded, right? Then can we go to tech enterprises, the biggest tech companies in the ecosystem, and make them love our product, right? I think as long as I think we are able to keep repeating that cycle, across product features, across demography, across markets, I think we are sorted. The moment we start expanding at a clip where we are not able to keep a tab on these things, I think it will be, something that will hurt us long term. And that's what happens with most startups as well, right? They are not able to get customers to love their product at scale or in a small segment, and they still try and do multiple other things, and then that kind of doesn't go well.
Yeah, no, make something people love. I think the Y-Combinator saying definitely rubs off, and that's been evident. I think the clarity that I observe in your thought process, right, which is visible from the start, and the conviction, I think that's a striking feature that all of us can take great cues from, because you can't be a Me Too player. You can't start copying features. You can't start going after trends that do not make sense for you. You have to stay true to what you set out to do and objectively go towards that part one step at a time. And that is really self-reflective. So wonderful to hear that. I think further, I want to, as we enter the closing segments of this conversation, I want to target a couple of specific things that you mentioned in the past, and those are very crucial to entrepreneurs. And I want to understand what you've thought about it and what are some actionable steps that you might have for us. So, therein, the first one is storytelling, right? Like, I distinctly remember you mentioning during a talk that you said that, I don't trust an entrepreneur who doesn't say a good story. And that's such an important thing as well, right? Because so much of what founders do is almost at all times storytelling. But what I want to ask you, as opposed to understanding the importance of storytelling, is how can entrepreneurs really, or even as a general life skill, how can we start saying our stories in a manner that makes, if not makes us feel good, but is explanatory to the other person and just clarifies our stories in the best possible manner? I think that'd be great and very actionable to everyone listening in. So yes, Shashank, would love your thoughts there.
As founders, we are telling stories every hour, every day. Right? We are
Yeah.
pitching someone or the other, and we have tell sometimes the same, sometimes a different variant of the story, thousands of times, right? To employees, to customers, to investors, to media, right? There's no end
Yeah.
to that, right? As long as you are an entrepreneur, and even beyond that, right? I mean, even beyond, for executives, for product managers, right? For salespeople, I think same kind of principle applies, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, as founders, right? Like, see, one of the simple things to get better is that you have to practice a lot. There is no substitute for it, right? There may be a very, very small percentage of people who are naturally gifted, right? Who are born with a flair of storytelling, and that's okay, right? But for a majority of folks and majority of founders, they have to develop that skill over time, right? And that's how most of the founders actually learn about it as well, right? They don't nobody starts a company and know how to sell or how to pitch uh, from the beginning, right? Even for us, it took us almost like 1-2 years to really understand the art, really understand the concept, and get it right. And even then, even now, we are still learning. We are still figuring out how to keep doing a better a better job of it. So I think the first thing is to do tons and tons of practice. There's no substitute for it, right? Second, I would say is like surround yourself with people who can give you feedback, right? Who can tell you honestly, like, what do they think, right? What they feel about it. I think for us, YC did that job in some ways, right? In Jaipur, we had few people who would tell us honestly, like, and give feedback as to what they thought uh, about it. It helps you initially get a perspective as to what, like, you may be thinking like you are doing a great job, but the person in front will not at all be thinking the same thing, right? And will completely on the different plane.
So true.
So that's the second part. Once you do these two things, I think the third part comes into play, which is developing a skill of reading the room or reading the people whom you are pitching to, right? Uh, where just observing people, how do they react to your points, right? And most of these are micro expressions. Nobody is going to, like, show their emotions very strongly, right? Uh, but the points that you tell, the aspects that you're telling, like, do they really like it? Do they like it? Do they feel happy about it? Right? Do they have a positive body language, right? Are they more into a discussion or not, right? Versus they're not engaged, right? They are just listening for the sake of it because they have to kill the time. They have committed that time to you, right? They might as well want to rush off the moment this closes, right? Uh, some people are very good at hiding emotions, but even then, like, the body language always tells that, right? Nobody is like like a pure very, very smart poker player with no emotions on the face. We all are emotional beings. All of us show emotions in different ways, right?
Absolutely.
Develop this sense of being able to read people's expressions, right? I think that will help you, start improvising, start modifying your approach on the go, right? Because you already know your material down pat, right? You know your material, just you have practiced it a lot of times, right? You have crafted it in a way that it relates to people, right? And in the end, like, it's more about, whenever you're talking to someone, you'll so if I'm talking to an investor versus I'm talking to a customer versus I'm talking to an employee, ultimately I'm talking about Razorpay or the startup that I'm doing, but I'll highlight different aspects of it. I'll highlight different points of it which the person in front of me can relate with.
Right. Oh, wonderful. I think I can't stress on it enough, but I love that answer. And I think it starts with the recognition that it's so important, and it then acceptance that it's okay to practice, right? I think in the barrage of things that exist for a founder, it can be very easy to sideline this and say that this is a second, third priority or not at all a priority. But the fact that you so sublimely mentioned that this is a priority, you have to practice it, you have to start reading people, and you have to get better at this, and become the way you tell stories or the way everybody else does, the successful founders do. I think that's so crucial. So wonderfully love that answer. I think
I'll
for,
tell you, right?
yeah, sure.
For entrepreneurs, good storytelling creates a lot of difference, especially in fundraising. Because the initial fundraising mostly happens on your own pitches and your own, uh, you know, ability to tell about the vision and the future that you want to create, right? So for entrepreneurs, initially, it's among the most important skills after, I would say, like, second only to talking to customers and building for customers, right? uh, and that can create a delta of, like, millions of dollars, uh,
Yeah.
for right, that's the level of importance that it has.
For sure. I think that's very evident, and I love the stress and focus on it. I think that sets a very good narrative for everyone listening in, and to be able to inculcate that in their persona, usually, right? Further, like if you talk about the first and second, I think the third most important skill for a founder is perhaps learnability, right? And you said this in the past: what you don't know, you learn. And as a techie, you've spoken about, although labeling is not something that I'd prefer, but you've spoken about how, as a product first person, tech first person, you've ended up learning things of finance, understanding balance sheets, talking to your CFO with full conviction, and all of the other aspects, right? So talk to us about how do you, again, the aspect that you have so much to do, you're already building, but you still take out time to consciously recognize where you have to fill the gaps and then approach it in a systematic manner. How do you get that learnability skill as a founder and practice it all throughout? I think I would love to understand more aspects of it.
Right. See, you know everyone knows what their gaps are. I don't think, if you talk to people, most of them,
Yeah.
if they talk to their managers or they talk to their peers, if you can have an honest conversation with 5 different people, you'll very quickly come to realize what they think about you, right? And what they think are some of the areas where you can improve, that is there, right? uh, that's one, right? Second would be, like, the goal that you're trying to achieve, right? You would know by yourself, like, what are things that you need, be it skills or knowledge or relationships or anything else, right? That will help you move towards the goal, right? That kind of SWOT analysis, or that kind of you know roadmap, right, or whatever you call it, like, you can draw. I mean, most people are able to draw that, right?
Yeah.
I think then it's a more of a question of, like, okay, just stack ranking and prioritizing certain things and accepting that, yes, I have certain areas of development, right? I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect, but also having the conviction that I can learn it, right? I can get better at it. That is there, right? And usually set goals of, like, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, certain timeline in which you think you can make, like, significant progress and get better at it. That is there. And a lot of these things, you'll have an internal compass to say whether you are getting better or not on a certain aspect that is there. And again, in a lot of these things, I think the day-to-day changes are very minor, so they may not appear big, but I think across months and especially across years, those changes combine to create a very different person, right? So what you would become in a year or two versus what you are now will be so significantly different that you couldn't imagine it right now, right? But you have to trust the process. You have to trust yourself that you'll get there, with conscious time investment and practice and various other tools that are at your disposal, right? You can read a lot. It's good to have mentors who can help with those kind of aspects that are there. A lot of times it helps by doing that activity itself. Like, like sales is one thing. Like, you get better if you keep doing sales over a long period of time, that is there, right? Otherwise, another tool that is good is, just taking very focused courses. So I'm not a big fan of like large year-long courses that are there, but I like taking courses which are very focused on a certain area that I want to get better at, right? So for example, I took courses in finance to understand how to read a balance sheet, that is there, right? Which is more like a, just like 1-2 hours every week over a period of 3 months, and that helps me have a better conversation on it, with my CFO or with finance folks in the team, that is there, and understand their viewpoint and where they are coming from, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there are various tools at a disposal. I don't think, I mean, in today's internet world,
Yeah.
one good thing is that you have access to a lot of material online, and then you can also figure out how to get access to people who can help you as well, right?
For sure. I think definitely, I think tools are available, but what's amazing to hear from you is the recognition and humility to learn. I mean, it could be very easy to get just caught up in day to day, right? And to get caught up with the already existing responsibilities that you perhaps have, but to know that you are still to date spending time to, upskill yourself and bridge those gaps, having recognized them. I think that's just it speaks volumes of your character and persona and the success of Razorpay. So great to hear that. I think one of the last questions I have, also running from the previous set of answers, is building networks, right? And this is also something that you've focused on in the past, but how important is it to be really cognizant of what you're doing and how you're going about it? Because Razorpay, early on, you went to, SF by when YC happened, and you spoke to a bunch of people, ended up, there's a story where you talk about, a lot of them ended up, staying connects later on as well. And that just compounded, and relationships are the best personification of compounding anyway. So if you can just talk to us about how some of us, right, like not everybody will have the right network, but it is in a post-COVID world where everything is virtual, I guess it becomes easier. So what are some of your cues in terms of building networks and going about it systematically? I think that'd be great to hear.
uh, this is one activity that I don't think I did consciously, but I think what I like as a person is talking to people,
Yeah.
talking to people who are smarter than me, who have been there, done that, people who are experts in their area, right? And just learning from their experience, right? Like I myself love doing that. So even in the initial days when we were in Bay Area, in YC, now I think we knew that we are not going to come back to Bay Area for a long period of time, right? This is what we have. There's a 3-4 months that we have, and that's it. So we try to connect with a lot of people, who are building in fintech, right? Or otherwise people who can help us connect to large banks in India or customers in India or some other objective, right? But what happened as a result is that we met a lot of folks, and we always have this thing that whoever we'll meet, we'll obviously try and understand their perspective on what we are doing or their experience. But we'd also, in the end, if the meeting has gone well, right, and mostly it does, ask them to connect us to 1 or 2 more folks whom they think will be very relevant to us.
Yeah.
Okay, so that chain is very strong, right? Because people genuinely want to help you if
Yeah.
uh, especially if they believe in what you are doing, that is there, right?
Yeah.
So I think when we were in Bay Area, right, I would have talked to like 5 people in a chain, right, who have connected me forward with the next person whom I am then talking to. And a lot of those relationships turn out to be very useful at a certain point of time when you really need them, uh, that is there, right? Or when you need some advice or suggestion in a certain area of expertise. Even back in India, right, I think I talk to a lot of founders or people, execs, or people who are good operators, right? So on every Saturday, I'd ensure that I talk to 2 or 3 people whom I have never met before, right, or whom I met a long time back, just to and I usually enjoy those kind of conversations, right? So that may not be for everyone, but that's been my approach, and I think it has stood me in good stead over time, and it helps in various ways as well. Like when we have to hire people, I think those connects turn out to be very useful in a way, like obviously like some of those are like really good hiring prospects, or otherwise they would know people in their circle whom whom they can recommend for hiring. That is there. So those that is what has been working for me in a way. And you'd always be part of certain communities or WhatsApp groups or networks, right, where you can figure out like who are the best people in that community, right, who uh, who obviously have a good thing going on their own, and have a very high leverage or high impact activities going on, right, and you can build relationships with them and talk to them, and you can just bootstrap from there and keep pursuing that activity over time. I think every year I would meet like hundreds of people whom I have never met before, and
Mhm.
there is no dearth of people in the ecosystem, right? I think
Yeah.
and that's been very helpful for me, and that's something I really enjoy as well.
For sure, no, that reflects, and learning from people is definitely a skill that has to come from within. Like it's a characteristic, I would say, and you're somebody who personifies it. And I think we have to just figure out our formula for it. But I think learning from people is definitely one of the best forms of learning there is. Wonderful. I mean, for the second last question, Shashank, like I know we've spoken a lot about your theories, your thought processes about Razorpay, but if we can maybe take a step back on a lighter note, understand how you as a founder have evolved perhaps from, the humble beginnings of 2014 to what may now seem like a huge success, right? And I'm sure it's a process for founders more so from the outside. It can seem very daunting, right? Like we can think of it as an overnight success. We can think of the awards. We can think of the valuations. We can think about the Forbes list, right? And all of those will always be there, I'm guessing, with success that comes. But how do you as a founder have evolved through this journey? What really matters? What do you think when you look back, and what do you see when you think about the next 10 years? I think the qualitative side of you as a founder, it'd be great to reflect a bit upon that.
Yeah, a lot of time has passed, right, since we started the organization, right? Since I took a jump into the startup world. I like to think that at the core, I haven't changed over the years, right? I'd like to think that I still have the same spark for building things, for creating impact that is there, and I usually have a certain uh, uh, you know certain disconnect from the regular material stuff that is there, and that also has not changed so much, right? I think as time goes on, right? I mean, the obviously, like the desire to you know do something positive has only increased, if I can say so, right? Because I've seen like how much powerful it is, right? How much more we can do, right? How many things that are there that can be solved in this world, and how we have so many problems out there which are waiting to be solved, right? If only we can put our minds to it, and that is what excites me. That is what keeps me going, and that's still the biggest thing that still makes me wake up every day and take up new challenges that is there, right? So that I think has been like a big constant for me, and it's only gotten stronger over time. That is there. Obviously, I think what has changed is that as time has gone on, went on, I think I've evolved a lot in terms of how, in terms of thought process, and what kind of problem statements I want to solve. Right? How do I utilize the resources at my disposal? Right? How do I be more efficient, be more smart in terms of my approach to solving problems, or my effort towards solving problems. I think those are the changes that have really happened, right? I think I've now I have a lot many more friends, a lot many more people, right, who probably believe in me, right, and would trust me uh, uh, by giving their effort or giving their ability to help solve certain challenges that are there, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are the more important changes that have happened over time, and I've obviously learned a lot of skills in the process. When we started, like, we mostly knew engineering and product to an extent. Now we know how to talk to customers, how to sell, how to as I mentioned, how to read balance sheets, right? How some of the just the soft and hard skills of running an organization that is there, right? I think those those are the things that have changed or evolved. But I think the core is still completely same. Like, I still think like, I still have the same thought process on, the kind of work that I want to do or the kind of change I want to create. That still is completely same. It's only become stronger over time.
For sure. And I think the humility is very, very evident. And to know, and what's going to stick with me is the fact that you said that I'm still the person that I was largely when you started Razorpay. And that I think is a large statement in the qualitative sense of it. So great to hear that. Shashank, for the last question, I had anyway thought of this and you referred to it a bit at the end of the previous answer. But your love for building is something that has been evident. And I would encourage to everyone who otherwise sees Shashank talk or, to anybody who knows you as well, they've all testified to the fact that at the core, you're somebody who loves building, who loves impact, right? And that is a inner DNA that any entrepreneur needs to have, right? So if you can just for the end of this conversation, mention to our listeners, from where do you derive that love? How do you keep fueling it? And what keeps you going in that particular aspect, right? I mean, how do you keep building and keep fueling it? Is it impact? Is it the number of customers that you serve? Is it the future scope? I mean, all of that combined in one, the entrepreneur's love for building. I think that would be a superb note to end this wonderful conversation on.
I think the thing, see, as I'll be very frank on this, right? I I think it derives from my own philosophy that is there, right? That all of us have the same amount of time, right? I think it's our choice what we want to do with it, right? And it boils down to the very core of the person, right? Like, as a person, what is your motivation, right? What is your uh, you know cornerstone, right? What are things that make you happy, right? Because those are things that are very difficult to change, that is there, right? Or even very difficult to realize as to what are your what's the cornerstone for your life, right? What's the cornerstone for your thinking, right? And if you realize that, then only you can enhance it, or you can try and change it, right? For me, it's always been that we have a small amount of time in life, right? And I want to use it to do something positive with it, right? So that whenever I look back, I feel happy about the work that I have done, the time that I have spent, right? The impact that I have created, right? And that's been constant for me since last 1.5 decade, if I can say, right? That I'm not happy with the day-to-day things that go on. Like, usually, like, that's something that is there, but my happiness usually comes by looking back and seeing that I gave my best, right? If I don't give my best, and usually I'm not happy, and I'll try and change something, right? So that I can be happy with whatever I am doing, right? And at the end of the day, when we're able to see people using our products, right? People happily giving feedback, right? Or seeing like the kind of change we have made in their lives, right? Then it gives a lot of pleasure and pride that whatever effort we have been doing has resulted into a very positive change, and that kind of fuels the aspect that let's keep going and let's keep building, because that is our strength, right? And let's keep creating positive impact.
Beautiful. I think giving your best is a definitive cue here. I've loved absolutely every aspect of this conversation, and thank you so much, Shashank, for your time. This has been truly wonderful, and I've picked up really great learnings from your discussion. I cannot thank you enough, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Thanks a lot, Jivraj. Really happy to come on the show and speak about my thinking, my life, my philosophies, and I hope it is the audience will also relate to it.
I'm certain they will. Thank you so much, Shashank.